course, I mean, Peter sadly has sort of disappeared from the whole thing, but he doesn't get the credit that's due to him.
Correct.
No, I mean, he really thought it up. I helped him do it, but he really thought it up. And he had this vision of what Tokai Ashu should be like,
Yes.
which was not current, you know, they were all in a mess. And he blended this what became Blue Label as a sort of benchmark, and it stayed that way. People just voted for it. They said, "This is something so typical of Tokai. We'll go for it."
And of course, what was amazing at the beginning, when we had to take the samples down to the OBI, the State Department, who control the quality of Tokai, and all these. I think there were 8 tasters there. They used to meet on Friday afternoons so they could take their cars and fill up with all the samples and then go home. And of course, when our beautifully fresh Royal Tokaji Azu came along, they rejected it because they thought, well, this is not what we've been used to. And it was what they were used to was over-oxidized, dull Azu wines that never really made any headway in the marketplace. So it was a seminal moment of really recreating something not that has been going on the last 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, but really pre-Second World War.
Or even First
World War.
Almost pre-First World War. Because the awful fate of Hungary was it was caught up. It was on the wrong side of the First World War. Its market, i.e. Russia, Poland, wiped out. And when the Tsars were murdered, the royal family was murdered, it was goodbye to the market in Russia, which was their main outlet. They've had 100 years of horror, really. Until we came along and opened up the world.
But we did. I remember when I was sort of doing the sales bit of it and travelling to already all corners of the wine drinking world. And I tried to meet the Hungarian ambassador in each capital. And I can't remember which capital it was. It could have been Washington. But the ambassador said to me, "Thank you for recreating our history." And he said, now I can go up and I can talk to the French ambassador, or the German ambassador, or the English ambassador abroad, and say, we too have a world-class product there, which they hadn't been able to before.
It's incredible. They needed reminding, really.
Absolutely.
I mean, the Soviet screw-up was so total.
Yeah.
People don't realise, I think that young people should be taught that the communists made such a mess of everything. Everything was corrupt, everything was a shortcut, everything was third rate. You couldn't trust anybody. It was going nowhere. I mean, it was bound to collapse, but people have got to remember that it was not a good idea.
And then also when we arrived and started to commercialise what Hugh and Peter Vinding-Diers had founded, it was quite difficult to explain to people that the intention was to make a profit and to make money and invest in it. Of course, that was completely anathema to them. They didn't understand what on earth we were talking about.
Well, we were thwarted in our intention for about 30 years.
But how wonderful, Hugh, wasn't it, to pioneer one of the world's greatest drinks.
Yes, I mean, what an extraordinary opportunity I wish there were another, actually.
Yes. Yes.
Well, there is, in a sense, because Constantia in the Cape was of equal status with Tokai in the 200 years ago. We paid outrageous prices for both. Napoleon would be sipping one or the other, and Constantia disappeared for different reasons. But Constantia was one wine estate. Tokai is a whole wine region, and it's a totally different thing.
It's 12,000 hectares, something like that?
It's about, isn't it about the same as the Côte d'Or in Burgundy?
About the same as Côte d'Or in Burgundy.
Yeah.
And you think of the intricacies of an apron of vineyards in the Côte d'Or, of which many of us know the names of, and we had the same pattern of vineyards over the different hills in Tokai. And really, we were the very first people to actually recognise that these were individual vineyards and had individual characteristics, and we've actually just now released the 2016 vintage of our 6 single vineyards. So these names, which been there for 200-300 years, just had not been used.
But there's another reason,
appellation,
which is that the great landowners made their wine or had it made for them, and they were estate wines more like Bordeaux Chateau, really. You know, you bought Count X or Y's wine rather than the wine of a particular vineyard, as it would be in Burgundy. So that the whole system was completely different. And occasionally they got a wine got a sort of nickname, or was named after. One of the most famous wines was named after Hungary's best ever racehorse. His name was Kingshem, and well, he gave his name to the vineyard and the wine. And the
yeah.
I like that idea.
And of course, the other thing which kind of amused people at the beginning is that there are several main towns within the region, Tokai being what was named after. But we were in the village of Mad, or perhaps Mard. And of course that was wonderful. And we were probably mad to go in there, but you know, what great madness. But it's spelled M-A-D, and so every time that we brought visitors out there, they always clung to the signpost so they could be photographed with the town side of Mad.
But it has taken those 30 years, it is 30 years now.
Yeah.
1990 we got cracking.
Yeah.
It's taken that long for these villages to recover anything of their personality, let alone prosperity. I mean, there's some marvellous old buildings there. Finally, they're getting around to being restored, and you see what kind of a place we're looking at.
I think, as you say, I think that was a unique experience, and of course, just after the wall came down, wasn't it, when you went over?
We felt so pioneering. We used to get the train down from the station, the main station in Budapest, and you pile into this rickety old train. The windows are all fogged up. Thick cigarette smoke. Everybody drinking, and bringing their sandwiches as well. A huge sort of atmosphere in this train.
And you used to have very good food on the train, and omelettes were special. And they used to keep the chickens on the train.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
so the eggs were fresh.
It's so cold in our house when we first got it that we had a corner stove, typical like a Russian corner stove where the babushka sleeps on top. And Peter and I used to sleep there in the winter, and we had 2 camp beds, and we just got them almost into the stove. It's the only way to survive.
And there were no hotels there. We couldn't. There were no hotels.
No restaurant either.
No hotels, no restaurants. And I remember one of the first times I went out there about lunch. So we thought, well, go to a local bar. Well, the local bar didn't really serve food. They hadn't got any food, and it was soup and bread. And they then asked for a glass of wine, and they didn't have any wine because they couldn't afford the bottles. It really was like that. I mean, and then it turned into a nightclub in the evening to get some extra revenue.
You reminded me. That's right. We'd done a little. We'd been round a few cellars, which was individual. There was no winery as such. Individual people's. They had a barrel of this and a barrel of that, and we were just going home, and the chap gave us his ordinary house wine. Not us, nothing grand. Just what I said. What do you drink at home? You see, and he poured this up. We actually loved it. So he said, "Can we have a bottle?" He said, "Bottle? I don't have any bottles." So we went to the cafe, and we got one of those old litre bottles they used to have of Coca-Cola. With the glass all moulded. And I don't suppose we drank the Coca-Cola, but we brought the wine home in a Coca-Cola bottle.
In the village of Mad, there's one tiny square which acts as the sort of centre where 7 different wine cellars, all underground, come off like spokes in a wheel. And I think there's something about 50 kilometres of cellars there, or 100 kilometres, I mean, almost as much as in Champagne. And all these cellars are all underground, they're all narrow, and they go back to the 14th century.
But remember when we met Istvan Sepchi? Because Istvan Sepchi is now the sort of local hero in a big way. He makes marvellous wine, and he's
Great character as well.
He's done very well out of it. But when we first met him, he came as our first manager at Royal Tokaji.
Yes.
I shall always remember going down to his little private cellar. It's funny, like a house door with an earth bank behind it, because it's straight into steps. And this one was on a crossroads, and we went down with Sepchi, and somehow hidden behind the stairs were two new French oak barrels. And the wine had that incredible freshness and sweetness and purity. And that, I think, was when we said to ourselves, it can be done. It is being done. When we come and help.
And he couldn't sell that wine, so he used to give it to various restaurants, or just clandestine restaurants, or to the family. But it wasn't, because it was a style that wasn't recognised, which is the correct style. He couldn't commercialise it. No, there's a real history. It's taken 30 years, really. But now it's implanted. It's now on wine lists and in people's minds.